Standing in the parking lot of the Riverside Chapel, I watched through the window as my ex-wife Valerie adjusted her wedding veil. The USB drive burned in my pocket like a hot coal. 2 years ago, she destroyed my life with false accusations. Today, I was about to return the favor. My name is Dennis Cartwright, and this is the story of how a single recording changed everything. I never thought I'd be here, watching the woman who destroyed me prepare to say, "I do" to another man. The spring air was thick with the scent of roses from the chapel's garden, but all I could smell was the motor oil that used to stain my hands back when I still had my shop, back when I was still allowed to see my son. The parking lot was full of luxury cars, BMWs and Mercedes lined up like soldiers, a far cry from the beat-up trucks that used to pull into Cartwright Auto Repair. Through that window, I could see her laughing with her bridesmaids, her head thrown back in that fake way she perfected years ago. The same laugh she used in court when she dabbed her eyes and told the judge how afraid she was of me. The same laugh that probably echoed through my son Tommy's ears when she told him his father was dangerous. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother Beatrice, who was inside the reception hall. "I'm ready. Just give me the signal." My 70-year-old mother, a retired school librarian who never raised her voice in 40 years of dealing with rowdy students, was about to become my weapon of truth. She had the USB drive I'd given her 3 days ago, tucked inside her small clutch purse next to her reading glasses and butterscotch candies. The man standing at the altar waiting for Valerie was Preston Holloway, a real estate developer who owned half the commercial buildings in town. 6 feet tall, silver temples, the kind of man who probably never changed his own oil or got dirt under his fingernails. He was everything Valerie always wanted me to be, but never said out loud until that day in her lawyer's office when she thought she'd won. I could see my son Tommy in there too, 12 years old now, stuffed into a tiny tuxedo and standing with the wedding party. He looked uncomfortable, pulling at his collar the same way he used to tug at his Little League uniform when he was 7. Back then, I was the one who taught him how to throw a curveball in our backyard. Now, Preston was probably the one signing his permission slips and going to his parent-teacher conferences. The wedding bells started ringing, that deep bronze sound echoing across the town square. Each chime felt like a countdown. 2 years I'd waited for this moment. 2 years of sleeping in my childhood bedroom while lawyers picked apart my life. 2 years of supervised phone calls that ended with my son asking why Mommy said I was a bad man. 2 years of keeping that recording safe, waiting for the perfect moment when the truth could destroy her the way her lies destroyed me. My father Roland had wanted to come with me today, but I told him to stay home. "This is something I need to do alone, Dad," I said over breakfast. He nodded, understanding in his weathered face. He'd been there through it all, watching his son lose everything to false accusations. He'd had to watch customers who'd known me since I was a kid cross the street to avoid talking to him. He'd had to sell some of his tools to help pay my legal bills. A proud man who built his business with his bare hands, reduced to defending his son's character to anyone who'd listen. The wedding march began to play, that traditional melody floating through the open chapel doors. Guests were standing, turning to watch Valerie make her entrance. She'd invited the whole town to witness her triumph, her final victory over the past. The mayor was there, the country club crowd, all the people who'd whispered about me in grocery store aisles and deleted my number from their phones. I touched the recording app on my phone, checking for the 100th time that the file was still there. 2 minutes and 37 seconds that would change everything. Her voice, clear and cruel, admitting to every lie, every fabrication, every calculated move to destroy me. She'd confessed it all, thinking she'd already won, never knowing that sometimes the condemned man keeps one card hidden. In 15 minutes, she'd be married. In 20 minutes, they'd be at the reception. In 25 minutes, my mother would stand up during the speeches and plug in that USB drive, and in 26 minutes, everyone in that room would know exactly what kind of woman Valerie Cartwright really was. I started my car but kept it in park, engine idling. I wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. I'd waited 2 years for this moment, and I was going to savor every second of her world collapsing the way mine had. The difference was, I fell because of lies. She was about to fall because of the truth. 3 years ago, I had everything a man could want. I owned Cartwright Auto Repair, the shop my father Roland started 40 years ago. Every morning, I'd unlock those bay doors with pride, breathing in the familiar smell of motor oil and metal. The concrete floors were stained with decades of work, each mark telling a story of problems solved and customers helped. My father's name was still painted on the sign outside, but everyone in town knew it as Dennis's place now. Tommy would visit after school, dropped off by the bus right at the shop's entrance. He'd burst through the door with his backpack bouncing, eager to tell me about his day. "Dad, can you show me how to change the oil?" he'd ask, and I'd ruffle his sandy hair, promising to teach him everything I knew. I'd set him up with his homework in the office, an old desk in the corner where he'd work on math problems while I rebuilt transmissions. Sometimes he'd look up and watch me through the glass window, mimicking my movements with his pencil like it was a wrench. My life had rhythm then. Coffee at 5:30 a.m., shop doors open by 6:00, first customer usually rolling in by 6:15. I knew everyone's car problems before they told me. Mrs. Henderson's Camry always needed brake work. Tom Bradley's truck would start making that grinding noise every 10,000 miles like clockwork. These weren't just customers. They were neighbors, friends, people who trusted me with their safety every time they drove away. Valerie and I had been married for 14 years. We met when I was 25 and she was 23, both of us young and thinking we knew what love was. She worked at a dental office in town, always perfectly put together, always smiling that brilliant smile that first caught my attention. Looking back, the warning signs were there like oil spots on a clean driveway. The way she'd manipulate situations, twist my words, make me question my own memory. "Dennis, you promised we'd go to the Bahamas this year," she'd say, even though I knew we'd never discussed it. Small lies that seemed harmless at the time. She'd pout and give me the silent treatment until I'd apologize for forgetting something I never said. Or she'd tell people at parties stories about me that weren't quite true, little embellishments that made her look better or more sympathetic. "Dennis works so much, I practically raised Tommy alone," she'd say, while I was working 60-hour weeks to pay for the house she insisted we needed. My parents, Roland and Beatrice, lived just 3 blocks away in the same brick house where I grew up. Sunday dinners at their house were tradition. Mom would make her famous pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the whole house smelling like comfort and home. Dad and I would sit on the back porch afterward, discussing the shop's finances and which equipment needed upgrading. "That boy Tommy's got mechanic's hands," Dad would say proudly, watching his grandson play with toy cars in the yard. "Just like his old man, just like his grandpa." Mom would save Tommy extra dessert, sneaking him cookies when Valerie wasn't looking. She was the kind of grandmother every kid deserved, quiet but fierce in her love. She'd been the town librarian for 38 years before retiring, and half the adults in town still called her Mrs. Cartwright with respect in their voices. The divorce started amicably enough. We agreed on joint custody without much fighting. I found a small apartment above the shop, turning the break room into a bedroom for Tommy's visits. I bought a second-hand bunk bed and let Tommy pick out superhero sheets. We'd eat pizza on Friday nights and watch movies on an old TV I brought up from the shop. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Then Valerie met Preston Holloway at some charity function downtown. Preston was everything I wasn't. College-educated, smooth-talking, wearing suits that cost more than I made in a month. He owned half the commercial real estate in 3 counties and had a house up on Riverside Drive where all the money lived. Within 6 months, Valerie had stars in her eyes and a 2-carat diamond on her finger. "Dennis, we need to talk about Tommy's living situation," Valerie said one October evening when she came to pick him up. Her voice had that calculated tone I'd learned to fear during our marriage. She stood in my apartment doorway, wouldn't even come inside, like being in my space might contaminate her somehow. Preston and I are getting serious. We think it would be better if Tommy had more stability. I told her joint custody was working fine. Tommy was happy, doing well in school, had friends in both neighborhoods. That's when her eyes narrowed, and she said the words that should have warned me, "We'll see about that." 2 weeks later, everything I'd built came crashing down. 2 weeks later, I was changing a transmission on a 2015 Honda Accord when 2 police officers walked into my shop. Officer Stevens, whose daughter I'd taught to check her oil just months before, wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dennis Cartwright, we need you to come with us." My wrench clattered to the floor. "What's this about?" "There's been a complaint filed. Domestic violence allegations. We need to bring you in for questioning." The word allegations hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I looked at my hands, covered in grease, hands that had never struck anyone in anger in my entire life. The other customers in the waiting area stared as I was led out in handcuffs, their eyes wide with shock and something else that would soon become familiar: suspicion. The accusations were devastating and methodical. Valerie had gone to the court with claims of physical and emotional abuse spanning years. She had photographs of bruises on her arms and legs, dark purple marks that looked fresh and painful. She had a diary with dated entries going back 3 years, documenting supposed incidents in heartbreaking detail. October 15th. Dennis grabbed me so hard I couldn't wear short sleeves for a week. January 8th. He threw a wrench at the wall next to my head when I asked about money. Lies written with the same hand that used to write me love notes in my lunchbox. She'd convinced her friend Nadine Summers to provide a sworn statement that she'd witnessed me grab Valerie aggressively at a 4th of July barbecue. Another friend claimed she'd seen Valerie crying in her car after dropping Tommy at my apartment. Even the pediatrician's report was twisted, with Valerie suggesting Tommy's nervous habits were signs of trauma from witnessing domestic violence. "Mr. Cartwright," Judge Harrison said, looking at me over his glasses with the weight of assumed guilt. "Given the serious nature of these allegations and the evidence presented, I'm granting a temporary restraining order and emergency full custody to Mrs. Cartwright." Just like that, I couldn't see my son. I couldn't go within 500 feet of my own house, the house I'd rewired with my own hands, where I'd built Tommy a treehouse the summer before. The judge's gavel might as well have been a gun, executing the life I'd known with one decisive blow. The news spread through our small town like spilled gasoline catching fire. By evening, everyone knew. Customers started canceling appointments. "I don't feel comfortable having him work on my car," I overheard Mrs. Patterson tell her husband when they thought I couldn't hear. "What if he's dangerous?" Jim Morrison, whose family I'd given discounts to for 20 years when times were tough, came to collect his truck early from a brake job. "Nothing personal, Dennis," he said, not looking at me, "but my wife doesn't want me associated with this situation." He handed me cash. Exact change, like I was a stranger. My father stood by me, stubborn as an old oak tree. "I know my son," he told anyone who'd listen at the hardware store, at the diner, at church. "Dennis would never hurt anyone. That woman is lying." But his voice was drowned out by the whispers. People who'd known me since I was born suddenly questioned everything. Was he always angry? Did you ever notice anything off? The way gossip works in a small town, by week's end, I'd transformed from Dennis the reliable mechanic to Dennis the wife-beater. The shop that had supported 3 generations began bleeding money faster than a punctured radiator losing coolant. I had to let go of Carlos, who'd worked with me for 8 years, and Randy, fresh out of technical school with a baby on the way. "I'm sorry, boys," I told them, handing over their final paychecks. "I can't keep you on with no customers." Then came the civil suit. Valerie was seeking damages for years of trauma and lost wages due to psychological distress. Her lawyer, a shark from the state capitol, painted a picture of a woman who'd lived in fear for over a decade. My lawyer fees ate through my savings account, then my retirement fund, then the emergency money I kept in the safe at the shop. "Dad, why can't I see you anymore?" Tommy asked during our one supervised phone call, a social worker listening to every word. His voice was small and confused, nothing like the confident boy who used to help me organize socket wrenches. "It's complicated, buddy, but I love you. Never forget that. Mom says you did bad things. She says you hurt her." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white, fighting back tears while the social worker took notes. "Tommy, sometimes adults have disagreements, but my love for you will never change. You're my best guy, remember?" "I guess," he said, and I could hear Valerie in the background telling him to wrap it up. The call ended after exactly 15 minutes per court orders. It would be our last conversation for 18 months. Everything changed during what was supposed to be our final meeting before the permanent custody hearing. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, gray clouds threatening rain, when Valerie had requested we meet at her lawyer's office to discuss settlement terms. She wanted to avoid a lengthy trial, her lawyer explained over the phone, for Tommy's sake. I should have known better, but desperation makes you grasp at any rope thrown your way, even if it might be tied into a noose. The law office was downtown in one of those renovated historic buildings, all exposed brick and modern furniture that screamed money. Valerie was already there when I arrived, sitting in a leather chair that probably cost more than I made in a month at the dealership where I now worked. She wore a navy dress and pearls, looking every inch the victim she pretended to be, while I sat there in my best khakis and a polo shirt that suddenly felt cheap. Her lawyer, Martin Blackwood, was a thin man with sharp features who looked at me like I was something he'd scrape off his shoe. "Mr. Cartwright, my client is prepared to be generous despite everything she's endured," he began, sliding papers across the mahogany table. "She's willing to drop the civil suit entirely if you agree to these custody terms." The terms were brutal. Supervised visitation once a month for 2 hours. No overnight visits for 5 years. I'd have to complete anger management courses and undergo psychological evaluation at my own expense. Tommy couldn't visit my parents without supervision. I'd have to pay 70% of my income in child support, despite Valerie's upcoming marriage to Preston. "This is insane," I said, pushing the papers back. "I've done nothing wrong." That's when Blackwood's phone rang. "Excuse me, I need to take this. It's regarding another case." He stood, straightening his tie. 5 minutes. The door clicked shut, leaving Valerie and me alone for the first time since she'd destroyed my life. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Then she smiled, and it was nothing like the smile I'd fallen in love with 17 years ago. This was the smile of a predator who knew the prey was cornered. "You know, Dennis," she said, examining her manicured nails with their perfect French tips, "you could make this all go away. Just sign over full custody, agree to the supervised visitation, and I'll drop the civil suit." Preston's lawyer drew up the papers himself. Very generous, considering. I pulled out my phone to check the time, a habit when I was nervous. My thumb found the record button almost by instinct, years of documenting customer complaints making it second nature. I pressed it discreetly, keeping the phone on the table like I was just fidgeting. "And if I don't?" She laughed, a sound like ice cracking on a frozen pond. "Then I'll make sure you never work in this town again. Preston has connections everywhere. One word from him and you won't even get a job pumping gas at the Stop and Go. He owns the building your precious family shop used to be in. Did you know that? We're turning it into a wine bar. Valerie, we both know those bruises were fake. You did this to yourself." "Of course I did." Her voice was casual, conversational, like she was discussing her recipe for potato salad. "The bruises were easy once I found the right technique. A rubber mallet works wonderfully, barely had to hit hard at all. Just had to be careful about placement, make them look like grab marks. The diary entries took more creativity, but backdating them was simple. I used different pens, varied the handwriting pressure to make it look authentic. Nadine owed me a favor from when I covered for her affair with her personal trainer. It's amazing how a few tears and some well-placed lies can destroy a man's entire life. Why? My voice cracked like I was 16 again, asking why Jenny Morrison wouldn't go to prom with me. Why would you do this to me? To Tommy? She leaned forward, and I could smell her perfume, the expensive kind she started wearing after meeting Preston. Because Preston doesn't want to raise another man's child part-time. He wants a clean slate for our new family. We're planning on having 2 kids of our own, maybe 3. Tommy will adjust better with one stable home instead of being shuffled back and forth like luggage. He's not luggage, he's our son. And honestly, Dennis, you were always too small town for me. The grease under your fingernails even at dinner, the way you were content with that pathetic shop, never wanting more than what your daddy had. Preston offers me the life I deserve. European vacations, country club memberships, a house with a name instead of a number. And Tommy, you're willing to take his father away for money and status. He'll adjust. Kids are resilient. Preston will be a better role model anyway. Successful, sophisticated, someone who reads the Financial Times instead of Car and Driver. Not some grease monkey who peaked in high school. The door opened. Blackwood returned, already talking about precedents and case law. Valerie's demeanor instantly shifted back to the wounded victim. "This is just so hard for me," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she produced from nowhere. I left that office with 2 minutes and 37 seconds of pure truth recorded on my phone. The wedding day arrived with perfect spring weather, as if God himself wanted to ensure maximum visibility for what was about to unfold. The Riverside Chapel stood pristine, white against a cloudless sky, its bells ready to celebrate a union built on the destruction of my life. I parked my old pickup across the street at 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the ceremony, positioning myself where I could see both the front entrance and the side window that looked into the reception hall. Guests arrived in waves, the who's who of our town dressed in their finest. Mayor Richardson and his wife pulled up in their Cadillac. The entire country club board of directors filed in together, their wives comparing jewelry in the sunlight. I recognized faces from every corner of my former life, customers who'd abandoned me, neighbors who'd whispered about me, even my son's Little League coach who'd suggested I shouldn't attend games anymore. My mother, Beatrice, arrived alone, dignified in her purple dress that she wore to every formal occasion. She walked slowly but deliberately, the USB drive I'd given her tucked safely in her clutch purse. We made eye contact briefly as she climbed the chapel steps. She gave me the slightest nod, the kind she used to give when I was a boy about to recite a poem at the school assembly. "You can do this," that nod said. The ceremony began at 2 p.m. sharp. Through the window, I watched Preston take his position at the altar, adjusting his platinum cufflinks and checking his Rolex. His groomsmen flanked him like corporate soldiers, all matching haircuts and rental tuxedos that still looked expensive. Tommy stood among them, my boy looking miserable in his tiny tuxedo, pulling at his collar every few seconds. He kept glancing around the church, and I wondered if he was looking for me. The music changed to the wedding march, that traditional tune that's supposed to signal joy and new beginnings. Valerie appeared at the entrance, a vision in white that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her dress had a train that required 2 attendants to manage, and her veil was held by a diamond tiara that caught the light like tiny stars. She'd invited everyone who mattered to witness her triumph, her final victory lap over the man she'd destroyed. The ceremony proceeded with sickening perfection. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the minister's mouth moving, probably talking about love and trust and faithfulness. The irony burned in my throat like acid. When they exchanged rings, Preston slipped what looked like a massive diamond band onto Valerie's finger. She dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, playing the emotional bride to perfection. By 3 p.m., everyone had moved to the reception hall adjacent to the chapel. The space had been transformed into what looked like a fairy tale, with white roses on every table, crystal chandeliers brought in specially, and a dance floor that gleamed like black ice. The DJ was setting up his equipment while waiters in bow ties circulated with champagne on silver trays. The speeches began after the third course. Preston's best man told stories about their college days at Yale. Valerie's sister gushed about how her sister had overcome so much adversity and deserved this happiness after everything she'd been through. Each word was a needle under my skin, but I waited. Patience had become my closest friend over the past 2 years. Then the moment arrived. The DJ announced that anyone who wanted to share words about the happy couple could come forward. Several people stood, but my mother was faster. At 70 years old, she moved with the determination of someone 50 years younger. "Excuse me, everyone," she said, her librarian voice carrying across the room with surprising authority. "I have something to share about the beautiful bride." Valerie's face shifted slightly, confusion flickering across her features. She knew my mother had been invited out of the social obligation, a gesture to show she harbored no ill will toward the Cartwright family. My mother walked to the DJ booth with measured steps. The young DJ, barely out of high school, looked confused as she handed him the USB drive. "Young man, please play this. It's a special message." "Ma'am, I need to check with the bride first about any audio that's going to be played," he started to say. "Play it now." Her voice had the same tone she'd used to quiet 40 years of rowdy students. The DJ plugged in the USB without another word. Valerie's voice filled the room, crystal clear through the professional sound system. "Of course I did. The bruises were easy once I found the right technique. A rubber mallet works wonderfully, barely had to hit hard at all." The room went silent. Champagne glasses stopped midway to lips. Forks hovering over wedding cake froze in place. Valerie's face went from confused to panicked to sheet white in the span of 3 seconds. Just had to be careful about placement, make them look like grab marks. The diary entries took more creativity, but backdating them was simple. Preston turned to stare at his new bride, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. "Valerie, what is this?" It's amazing how a few tears and some well-placed lies can destroy a man's entire life. The recording continued with surgical precision, each word a scalpel cutting away the lies. Tommy stood up from the children's table, his young face struggling to process what he was hearing. His mother's voice, cheerful and casual, admitting she'd fabricated everything, admitting she'd destroyed his father for convenience. "He'll adjust. Kids are resilient. Preston will be a better role model anyway. Successful, sophisticated, not some grease monkey who peaked in high school." The recording ended. The silence was absolute, the kind that occurs in nature just before a massive storm breaks. Preston's mother stood up first, her pearl necklace trembling with her rage. "You lied about abuse? You destroyed a man's life for convenience? You used the court system like a weapon?" Her voice rose with each question, decades of high society composure cracking like thin ice. "Preston, I can explain," Valerie started, reaching for her new husband's arm. He jerked away from her touch like she was poisonous. "Explain? Explain how you manipulated the court system? How you took a child from his father with lies? How you destroyed an innocent man and made me complicit in it?" Preston's face had turned the color of expensive bourbon, dark and dangerous. "I thought I was protecting you from an abuser. I thought I was giving Tommy a safe home. Instead, I married a monster." He pulled off his wedding ring, the platinum band making a sharp sound as it hit the table. "The marriage is annulled. I'll have my lawyers contact you by Monday." He turned to address the room. "Everyone here is my witness. This marriage was entered under false pretenses. It's over." As Preston stormed out, other guests began leaving in a rush. Some looked disgusted, others shocked, many ashamed that they'd believed the lies. Judge Harrison, who'd presided over our custody hearing and was here as Preston's golf buddy, looked physically ill. He knew what this meant for his career, for every decision he'd made based on false testimony. Nadine Summers tried to slip out quietly, but Valerie's sister grabbed her arm. "You lied under oath. You helped her do this." Nadine pulled free and ran, her high heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to her own legal troubles. Tommy broke free from Valerie's sister and ran out of the hall. I saw him burst through the side door into the parking lot, his small frame shaking with sobs. Every instinct in my body screamed to go to him, but I stayed in my truck. The restraining order was still active for another 12 hours. The recording went viral within 3 days. Someone at the wedding, probably one of the younger guests, had filmed the entire revelation on their phone. "Bride's Confession Ruins Her Own Wedding" became the headline that appeared on every news site. The video had 4 million views in the first week. Valerie tried to claim the recording was edited, that it was taken out of context, but tech experts confirmed it was authentic and unaltered. Within 2 weeks, the district attorney's office opened an investigation into perjury charges, filing false police reports, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Nadine Summers came forward with her own lawyer, admitting she'd lied under oath because Valerie had blackmailed her about an affair. 2 other friends admitted they'd been pressured to provide false testimony. The house of cards collapsed faster than a transmission with no fluid. The custody order was reversed in an emergency hearing. Judge Harrison recused himself, his reputation in tatters. The new judge, a woman from the next county over, looked at the evidence with fresh eyes and barely contained disgust. "Mr. Cartwright, this court owes you an apology that words cannot adequately express. Full custody is restored to you immediately." The first time Tommy came to stay with me, he stood in my apartment doorway with his backpack, uncertain and guilty. "Dad, I'm sorry I believed her. I'm sorry I thought you were bad." I dropped to my knees and pulled him into the tightest hug of our lives. "You have nothing to be sorry for, son. Nothing at all. She's your mom. You were supposed to believe her. That's what makes what she did so evil." We rebuilt our relationship one day at a time. I taught him how to change oil in my father's garage, just like I'd promised years ago. He helped me restore a 1967 Mustang, learning about engines and hard work and truth. "Grandpa says, you're the best mechanic he knows," Tommy told me one afternoon, grease smudged on his cheek just like mine used to be. "He says you fix more than cars. You fix things that are broken." Valerie was sentenced to 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service after pleading no contest to reduced charges. She lost her job at the dental office and her nursing license was suspended. The country club revoked her membership. Last I heard, she moved to Florida to live with a cousin who was the only family member still speaking to her. Preston sent me a letter 6 months later. It was short but meaningful. "I'm sorry for my part in this. I should have questioned things. I should have looked deeper. I let my feelings cloud my judgment. Your son is lucky to have a father who never gave up." The shop was gone forever, sold and turned into that wine bar Valerie had mentioned. But I realized something profound in those dark months afterward. She could take my reputation temporarily. She could take my business, my savings, even years with my son. But she couldn't take the truth. Truth has a way of surfacing, like oil in water, always rising to the top no matter how deep you try to bury it. My father put it best over Sunday dinner 6 months later, his weathered hands steady as he carved the roast. "Son, a man's character isn't measured when life's easy. It's measured when everything's taken from you, and you still choose to do what's right. You waited, you endured. You didn't seek revenge, you sought justice. There's a difference." Tommy lives with me full-time now. He's thriving in school, plays baseball, and helps me work on cars every weekend. Every morning when I drop him at school, he says, "Love you, Dad," without any prompting. Those 3 words heal wounds that may never fully close. He's in therapy to process what happened, and some days are harder than others, but we're together, and that's what matters. My mother became something of a local hero, the quiet librarian who pressed play when it mattered most. Someone had to tell the truth, she says simply whenever anyone brings it up. I'd watched that woman destroy my son for 2 years. When the opportunity came, I took it. The wedding guests still talk about that day. The day a $200,000 wedding became a crime scene. The day a groom ran from his own reception. The day 2 minutes and 37 seconds of truth destroyed 2 years of lies. Some called it the wedding of the century, though not for the reasons Valerie had hoped. As for me, I learned that patience isn't just a virtue, it's a weapon. Sometimes justice doesn't come from judges or lawyers or the system that's supposed to protect us. Sometimes it comes from a simple recording and the courage of a grandmother who'd heard enough lies. Sometimes it comes from waiting for the perfect moment when the truth can do the most good, or, in this case, the most necessary damage. I work at a different shop now. 3 towns over where the story is just gossip rather than personal knowledge. I'm saving money to maybe open my own place again someday. Tommy says he wants to be my business partner when he's older. We'll call it Cartwright and Son Auto Repair, he says, just like Grandpa did with you. The recording didn't just expose Valerie's lies. It gave me back my son, my dignity, and proof that truth, even when delayed, is still the most powerful force in the world. It taught me that rock bottom isn't the end of your story, it's the foundation you build your comeback on. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been falsely accused or had to fight for truth when everyone believed lies, then you understand that justice delayed doesn't always mean justice denied. Sometimes it just means justice is waiting for its moment to shine. Like that video, share it with someone who needs to hear that truth always finds a way. Comment below with your own experiences of truth triumphing over lies. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories of regular people facing extraordinary circumstances and coming out stronger on the other side. Because everyone loves a good comeback story, especially when the good guy wins in the end.